Over the past decade, I have watched the Salesforce ecosystem evolve at an extraordinary pace. The platform has become more powerful, more intelligent, and significantly more sophisticated than many of us could have imagined when we first started working with it. New clouds have emerged. Automation has become increasingly accessible. AI is now embedded into strategic roadmaps. And entire specialist disciplines have been developed around architecture, data, governance, and platform design. From a technology perspective, it's difficult not to be impressed by how far Salesforce has come. Yet, alongside this process, I've observed another trend. It's not discussed nearly as often as AI, Agentforce, or digital transformation. But I believe it has the potential to become one of the most significant challenges facing organizations that rely on Salesforce. It's a trend that becomes visible only when you spend time with both sides of the ecosystem. On one side, we have the experts, architects, developers, consultants, admins, and implementation teams. On the other side are the people who use Salesforce every single day to sell, serve, manage, and make decisions. Increasingly, these two groups appear to be experiencing the same platform in fundamentally different ways. This is not because one group is right and the other is wrong. Nor is it because anybody is deliberately ignoring the needs of users. Rather, it's because expertise changes perspective. The deeper someone travels into a specialist field, the more the understanding of that field evolves. They begin to see patterns that others just cannot see. They develop a language that allows them to communicate efficiently with other experts. They become capable of solving increasingly complex problems. And these are all positive developments. However, there's also a consequence. The further experts move into the world, the harder it becomes to remember what the world looks from the outside. I see evidence of this gap almost every week. While implementation teams discuss data models, integrations, and automation strategies, engineers are worried about finding customer information quickly, updating records efficiently, and understanding what they are supposed to do next. While experts debate future technology trends, many users continue to struggle with challenges they have existed for years. While organizations invest heavily in platform capabilities, managers still question reporting accuracy. Teams continue to make spreadsheets, and employees create workarounds that bypass the very system designed to help them. What fascinates me is that both groups are often discussing the same system, yet they're having entirely different conversations. The Salesforce expert, they see a platform. The Salesforce user, they see a job. The expert sees architecture. The user sees workload. The expert sees functionality. The user sees friction, effort, and outcomes. The more I reflect on this trend, the more convinced I become that many of the adoption challenges organizations face today are not technology problems at all. They're translation problems. Somewhere between the people designing Salesforce and the people using Salesforce, a gap has emerged. Understanding why that gap exists is the first step towards closing it. The first reason is what psychologists often describe as the curse of expertise. Once people become highly knowledgeable in a particular subject, it becomes remarkably difficult for them to remember what it felt like not to possess that knowledge. And this is not arrogance, it's simple human nature. The things that once seemed complex become obvious. The terminology that once required explanation becomes second nature. The navigation paths that once felt confusing becomes instinctive. A Salesforce consultant who spent 10 years implementing solutions experienced the platform very differently from a sales manager who spends 20 minutes a day inside it. An architect understands relationships between objects almost automatically. An admin instinctively knows where information is stored and how records connect. A developer can visualize the logic behind automation and integration. These capabilities are valuable and necessary. However, they also create a subtle challenge. Experts stop experiencing the same obstacles that ordinary users encounter. One of the most common observations I make during training sessions is that many implementation decisions are entirely logical from an expert perspective, but considerably less intuitive from a user perspective. Pages become crowded because every stakeholder requests additional information. Processes become longer because every business rule must be enforced. Navigation becomes complex because additional functionality is introduced. Individually, these decisions often make perfect sense. Collectively, they can create an experience that feels overwhelming for the people expected to use the system every single day. The second reason the gap continues to grow is language. Every profession develops its own vocabulary. Lawyers, accountants, engineers, and doctors all create specialist language that allows experts to communicate efficiently with one another. Salesforce is no different. Spend enough time in implementation projects and terms such as metadata, object, flows, validation rules, integration, and permission sets become completely normal. The problem is that most business users do not think in those terms, nor should they. When a customer service manager discusses a problem, they rarely talk about fields or workflows. They talk about response times, escalations, and customer satisfaction. When a sales rep thinks about their day, they're focused on opportunities, meetings, and targets. When a senior leader reviews a dashboard, they're concerned with performance, forecasting, and decision making. The ecosystem often talks about Salesforce, users talk about work. This distinction may appear small, but it has profound consequences. The moment organizations begin discussing systems rather than outcomes, they risk losing sight of the people those systems exist to support. I have sat in workshops where teams spent hours discussing platform design and only a few minutes discussing how users actually experience their day. The language of implementation gradually replaces the language of operations. Over time, the system becomes increasingly optimized for those who understand Salesforce and increasingly difficult for those who simply need to use it. The third reason is that experts and users frequently define success in different ways. This may be the most overlooked aspect of the problem. For an implementation team, success often means delivering a solution that meets requirements, functions correctly, and launches on time. For architects, success may mean creating a scalable and technically elegant design. For admins, success may mean maintaining data integrity and governance. And these are all legitimate measures of success. Users, however, tend to apply a much simpler test. Does this make my job easier? That question is brutally honest. It cuts through every project plan, every steering committee update, and every architecture diagram. Users do not judge the system according to how difficult it was to build. They judge it according to whether it helps them achieve their objective more effectively than before. This explains why organizations can sometimes declare projects successful while simultaneously struggling with adoption. The system works. The project is complete. The requirements have been delivered. Yet users continue to rely on spreadsheets, avoid certain processes, or question the information they receive. Technically, the project succeeded. Operationally, the outcome remains uncertain. The fourth reason for the growing divide is exposure. Salesforce professionals spend an extraordinary amount of time inside the platform. Many users just don't. A consultant may spend 40 hours each week navigating Salesforce. A sales rep may spend a few hours. A manager may spend even less. The difference in familiarity is enormous. What feels obvious to someone who lives inside the platform can feel confusing to someone who visited periodically between meetings, customer calls, and competing priorities. This is particularly important because users rarely interact with Salesforce in an ideal situation. They're often distracted, under pressure, and balancing multiple responsibilities. They may be switching between systems, responding to customers, and managing deadlines simultaneously. The expert experiences Salesforce as a dedicated environment. The user experiences Salesforce as one component of a busy working day. That difference shapes everything. It influences how people learn, how they navigate, and how much information they can absorb, and how willing they are to adopt new processes. Yet many implementation decisions are made by people whose level of familiarity is dramatically higher than the people they are designing for. The fifth and perhaps most significant reason is that the ecosystem naturally reports technical depth. Salesforce has created one of the most impressive professional communities in the technological industry. Certification, specialist roles, conferences, and learning paths have helped thousands of people building very successful careers. The ecosystem encourages individuals to deepen their expertise, and organizations benefit enormously from that resulting capability. However, there's subtle imbalance in how expertise is recognized. Technical knowledge is hardly visible. Human understanding is often less so. An architect can demonstrate technical mastery through designs and certification. A developer can demonstrate experience through solutions they build. Yet understanding how people learn, adopt change, and integrate technology in their daily work is often treated as a secondary skill rather than a core capability. The result is an ecosystem that continuously produces stronger builders while placing less emphasis on those who specialize in adoption, behavior, and user experience. This matters because technology alone does not create value. Behavior creates value. Salesforce only delivers a return on investment when people use it consistently, correctly, and confidently. The moment organizations overlook this reality, they risk investing heavily in capabilities that never achieve their full potential. The consequences of this growing divide are visible across organizations of every size. Data quality suffers because users do not understand why information matters. Reporting becomes unreliable because processes are applied inconsistently. Managers lose confidence in dashboards because underlying behavior varies from team to team. Employees develop spreadsheets and workarounds because they perceive them easier than following official processes. Organizations often describe these symptoms as adoption challenges, but in many cases these are symptoms of something deeper. They're symptoms of a disconnect between the people who design systems and the people who use them. The encouraging news is that this gap is not inevitable. Organizations can close it, but doing so requires a shift in mindset. The first step is to design around human workflows rather than Salesforce objects. One of the most effective techniques I use when developing training is what we call a day in the life approach. Instead of starting with the structure of the platform, we start with the structure of work. What does a sales rep do when they begin their day? What decisions does a customer service advisor make most frequently? What information does a manager need before a leadership meeting? These questions produce remarkably different conversations from those that begin with accounts, contacts, or opportunities. They force organizations to think about work before technology. When systems are designed around human workflows, users find them easier to understand because technology reflects the reality of their work, rather than the structure of the platform. The second step is to involve users much earlier in the design process. Too often, users become heavily involved only during testing or training. By that stage, many critical decisions have already been made. Organizations would achieve far greater success if they treated users as contributors rather than recipients. The people performing the work every day possess insights that no project team can fully replicate. They understand where friction exists, which processes are generally important, and where previous solutions have failed. Their perspective is not a nice to have, it is essential. The first step is perhaps most important of all. Organizations need to elevate the role of translators. Every successful Salesforce program requires people who can connect technical possibilities with operational reality. These individuals may be product owners, business analysts, change professionals, or trainers. Their value lies in their ability to understand both worlds simultaneously. They can speak the language of technology while remaining grounded in the realities of business operations. They recognize where assumptions are forming and where misunderstandings are emerging. Most importantly, they ensure that conversations remain connected to the people who ultimately determine whether a solution succeeds. As Salesforce continues its rapid evolution, the importance of these translators will only increase. AI will make the platform more powerful. Automation will become more sophisticated. Architectures will continue to grow in complexity. Yet none of these developments will eliminate the need for human understanding. In many ways, they will make it even more important. The future of the Salesforce ecosystem will not be determined solely by the quality of its technology. It will be determined by how effectively organizations bridge the gap between those who build technology and those who rely upon it. The companies that succeed will not necessarily be those with the most advanced systems. They will be those that become exceptionally good at translation. They will understand that implementation and adoption are not separate activities. They are two sides of the same challenge. Because ultimately, sales is not judged by how sophistication of its architecture or the elegance of its automation. It's judged by whether ordinary people can use it to achieve extraordinary results. The organizations that remember this will continue to unlock value from the platform. Those that forget it may discover that the greatest challenge they face is not technological complexity, but the growing distance between expertise and experience.